a remote corner of northern Nevada. The mountainous terrain seems harsh and unwelcoming, but there's gold in them thar hills. This is the richest gold field in the Western Hemisphere. More than $4 billion worth of gold is extracted from this frosty ground every year. Amazingly, though, none of the gold miners here gets to see any of it, because the gold is spread through the rock so thinly that in its natural state, it's only visible under an electron microscope. So how do you find the stuff, and how do you turn it into bars of bullion? How do they do it? In the crazy days of the gold rush, it all seemed so simple. You headed out west and panned the rivers for golden nuggets. Since then, the complexity and scale of gold prospecting has changed beyond all recognition. This vast mine is a mile wide and a quarter of a mile deep. Millions of tons of ore have already been extracted from the surface. Now they're having to go deeper, tunneling far underground. Working down a gold mine today is safer than it used to be, but the miners still take the same basic precautions, and that includes a tradition called brassing in.
And on this brass board, there's a brass tag for everybody that works here. And there's a corresponding brass tag on our belt or in our pocket so that we know who each other is. And then if there ever is an emergency, all the people meet up here and they pull their brass tag off so that anybody that is left in the mine, their tag will be left and they know who it is.
Locating the gold is no longer left to a few enterprising prospectors. It's now a highly specialized job for trained scientists. There are very few people in the world who have the golden touch. One of them is geologist John Powell. Today, he's combing the hills of northern Nevada looking for potential new deposits of gold. And it looks like he may have struck lucky.
You see some quartz veins shooting through the rock here. That's also can be an indication of gold mineralization. And then up here, there's some barite crystals, which also tend to be associated with the gold mineralization. Whenever you see this type of alteration in a rock, it's a good indicator. And so what I'd want to do is take a sample of this rock and take it back to the lab and have it assayed and see if there's any gold in it.
One thing that hasn't changed in the search for precious metals is the buzz.
You're sort of chasing down a mystery. I mean, gold is only where you find it, and so when you see rocks like this with this type of alteration, it gets you excited.
But even John's trained eye isn't enough to tell for sure whether he struck gold. The only way to find out is to take the rock back to the lab and cook it. Each of these small clay crucibles contains a mixture of rock with bicarbonate of soda, flour, lead, and borax glass. To look for gold, you first have to cook this mixture in a furnace at over 1,000 degrees Celsius for an hour. Once the mixture is perfectly liquid, it can be poured into a mold and left to cool. As it cools, the lead and gold sink to the bottom, and the borax glass and various impurities float to the top, forming a glassy slag or waste. And as the slag cools, it pops. Then the slag is broken off, leaving a button of lead and gold. But they still need to separate the gold from the lead. To do that, they use a process called cupellation. The lead button is placed on a small dish, or cupel, and returned to the oven. As the lead melts and oxidizes, it's absorbed by the dish, just like blotting paper soaking up water. And all that's left behind is a tiny bead of semi-purified gold, called doré. If the geologists find enough gold in this rock, they go for it. In just one explosion, 200 tons of rock are blasted from the hills. Blasting carries on sporadically above and below ground. To get the rock from the tunnel, massive diggers move up to the blasted face and do what's called mucking out. Huge shovels scoop 14 tons of rock at a time and load it onto waiting trucks. Over 300,000 tons of rock are driven out of this mine every year, but in each ton there may be as little as 5 grams of gold. Getting that speck of gold is a major challenge. The only way to extract it is by leaching the rock with chemicals. But before that can be done, the rock must be crushed. First, the rock is loaded onto conveyor belts. Then it's taken through a series of giant rotating mills. These 13,500 horsepower beasts pound the rock relentlessly, pulverizing it with thousands of steel balls. Water is added to the powdered rock, creating a dirty, ugly slurry. Remember the saying, where there's muck, there's money? Now the chemical extraction process begins, and the first chemical needed is a surprising one: cyanide. It's deadly to humans. It also has the power to dissolve gold. Carbon is then added to the slurry, which absorbs both the gold and the cyanide. So now the gold is concentrated inside the carbon. It's at a much higher concentration than it was before, but there's still nothing glittering yet.
And the gold in our ores is basically invisible gold. It's so small that you can't see it. And we, in fact, never see the gold ourselves until it's poured into those bars.
The final stage of the alchemy takes place in a heavily fortified building. This end of the operation is top secret, and only a handful of vetted mine employees are allowed inside. The gold is now at a valuable concentration. But as yet, there are still no gold bars to be seen. The carbon, cyanide, and gold solution arrives here in pipes and is pumped directly into these tanks. At this stage, each of these baths contains around $500,000 worth of gold. The liquid goes through a process called electrowinning, where steel wool attracts the gold from the cyanide and carbon. The gold-rich steel wool is then soaked in sulfuric acid, destroying everything except the gold. Now comes the fun part. Here, the molten gold is poured into molds, and for the first time, it starts to look familiar.
To pour this gold, as hot as it is, it's actually quite unnerving. If you make a mistake, that gold will splash up. You can't burn yourself. We deal with the finished product. You know, we actually see a gold bar. A lot of people go through an entire life of mining only seeing dirt.
These bars are still only 90% pure. They'll be refined one more time before being sold. Gold mining is a complicated, laborious, and expensive business. No wonder gold is one of the most highly valued objects on Earth.